This planet is threatened with destruction, and we who live in it with death. The heavens reek, the waters below are foul, children die in infancy, and we and the world, which is our home, live on the brink of nuclear annihilation. We are in a crisis of survival.
This is a CBS News special, Earth Day, a question of survival, with CBS News correspondent Walter Cronkite.
Good evening. A unique day in American history is ending, a day set aside for a nationwide outpouring of mankind seeking its own survival. Earth Day, a day dedicated to enlisting all the citizens of a bountiful country in the common cause of saving life from the deadly byproducts of that bounty, the fouled skies, the filthy waters, the littered earth. As a demonstration, its success was mixed, beyond expectations here, far below there. No one now can know exactly how many took part. We do have an idea how many planned participation, student groups in 2,000 colleges and 10,000 lower schools, citizen groups in 2,000 communities. By one measurement, Earth Day failed. It did not unite. It did attract that broad cross-section of America its sponsors wanted, not quite. Its demonstrators were predominantly young, predominantly white, predominantly anti-Nixon. Often its protests appeared frivolous, its protesters curiously carefree. Yet the gravity of the message of Earth Day still came through. Act or die. We begin our report with Bruce Morton in Denver.
Place for Purple Mountain's majesty. A place where on a clear day, the legend says, you could see forever. The clear days are fewer now, and instead of forever, the view often stops with haze. Next to Los Angeles, Denver has the best climate in the country for producing smog. In this unlikely seeming place, the air is threatened. Earth Day is a focus for efforts to save it.
Bicycles at the state capitol were a Denver symbol. Auto pollution is a major problem here in the country's 17th most polluted city, so high schoolers pedal to show there's another way to travel. The altitude increases car engines' pollution output. It doesn't do a thing to bikes. Somebody in the cheerful, disorganized crowd said, let's clean up, and the several hundred young people did, scouring the Capitol grounds for litter. Cleanups like this went on in many parts of Denver today. Somebody got a wastebasket from the Capitol and said it must be the only one, but there were enough paper bags to go around. Then they left for the teach-in, bikers on bikes, but hundreds of others traveling on foot. Some sang, some shouted, all seemed to enjoy the day. High schools were not closed, but many announced absences would be excused. Corrigan Plaza, the hall, was arranged to seat 6,000, though some planners predicted a half-full house. In fact, it was better than that. Lots of coming and going, but about 5,000 seats filled. Most were young, but not all. Most were white, but not all. A group who'd bicycled across the state gave Governor John Love a declaration supporting a cleaner planet, and the governor signed it. The crowd heard calls for revolution, calls for working within the system. Earth Day's founder and co-sponsor, Senator Gaylord Nelson, offered a more specific plan.
We elect an ecology Congress as the 92nd Congress, a Congress that will build bridges between our citizens and between men and nature's systems, instead of building more highways and dams and new weapon systems that escalate the arms race. Environment is all of America and its problems. It's the rats in the ghetto. It's a hungry child in a land of affluence. It is housing that's not worthy the name and neighborhoods not fit to inhabit. Environment is a problem perpetuated by expenditures of tens of billions of dollars a year on the Vietnam War instead of on our decaying, crowded, congested, polluted urban areas that are inhuman traps for millions of people. If our cities don't work, America won't work. And the battle to save them and end the divisiveness that still splits the country won't be won in Vietnam.
Unlike the war and civil rights demonstrations of recent years, Earth Day's protest was not focused directly on Washington. and the crowds in the Capitol were small. Daniel Shore reports.
Here on the Washington Monument grounds, only 3,000 gathered in a rally climaxing Earth Day in the capital to which this nation looks for its environmental rescue. Unlike Vietnam, this is a cause which could have united the administration and the Crusaders. It did not. Mainly, they went their separate, polarized ways, as the events since this morning showed.
Yeah, there'll be no pollution in that land. Be no pollution in that land.
Here in L'Enfant Square, an administration-blessed meeting at noonday, mainly for government workers. But it drew fewer than 100, even though the Office of Education gave its staff time off to attend and provided a drawing card like Assistant Welfare Secretary James Farmer.
The garbage, the trash, the carbon monoxide, the junk. Who suffers most from it if it is not the poor? And so the poor, especially the ghettoized poor, the black and the brown and the red, stand to benefit first from any successes in cleaning up the environment.
An establishment rally was not where the action was. It was among the students. About 1,000 of them marched. Their first target, the federal establishment, in the form of the Department of Interior. Now their numbers swell. They have gathered at the Washington Monument with their own heroes, but no administration heroes.
We've dumped defoliants on Vietnam at the rate of 10,000 pounds a month. And in the last fiscal year alone, we blackened 6,600 square miles. We cannot pretend to be concerned with the environment of this country or any other country as long as we continue to engage in a war in Vietnam or a similar war in Cambodia or Laos or anywhere else. But even if that war were over tomorrow, we would still be killing this planet. We are systematically destroying our land, our streams, and our seas. We foul our air, deaden our senses, and pollute our bodies. And it's getting worse. Tens of thousands of people will soon die in Los Angeles in a thermal inversion that's probably now inevitable. And there's not a single instrument within the existing order that is stopping the poisonous flow of traffic into that system. That's what America's become. That's what we have to challenge.
It was from Washington that 25-year-old Dennis Hayes started to organize this nationwide thing, and it is here he has returned tonight to say that this thing is now a movement, and like Vietnam, an anti-establishment movement. Daniel Shore, CBS News, at the Washington Monument.
In smaller cities and towns across the country, it was the young people from schools and colleges who took the community lead in trying to make Earth Day the beginning of an environmental crusade. We have reports on two typical cases. First, Hughes Rudd.
Albion, Michigan, population 14,000, calls itself Manufacturing City, USA, which is somewhat ambitious. But the town does have a problem: iron foundries, and not all of them have installed anti-pollution equipment required by state law. Albion also has the usual look of America, trash and junk along the roadsides. Not as much as bigger cities, but still too much.
But today is Trash Wednesday, as the students at Albion College call it, and people from just about every section of the community have turned out to clean up their town. These students are cleaning up a small area along the Kalamazoo River to make it into a park.
Once the lot is cleared, the city has agreed to make the space into a park. The cleanup leader is Walt Pomeroy, a geology student at Albion College.
So have you organized any demonstrations or picket lines against the factories that do the polluting?
No demonstrations per se. We have been able to sit down with the factories and community members to discuss this because we were afraid that if we, picketed the factories, that we would actually turn the community against us. And they have been able to sit down and discuss this with us, as we have been able to on the college campus.
The Albion students may not be demonstrating, but they still managed to make a lot of noise, and it looked like more fun than all that stooping labor at the vacant lot. The idea is to squash the cans so they're easier to pack for shipment back to the companies which made them. The students are against non-aluminum cans because they aren't melted down and reused. The aluminum cans will be sold to a local scrap dealer. Those citizens who weren't interested in jumping up and down in public attacked the Kalamazoo riverbanks yesterday.
Oh, man. We need a little help. Let's go, let's go. Let's go.
And even some of the youngest citizens of Albion got involved in Trash Wednesday. Kindergartners and first graders in a predominantly black school darted around the school grounds picking up just about everything in sight, including a lot of dead leaves. That wasn't exactly the right idea, but they certainly had the right spirit.
What's this all about? What are you doing? Huh? Why are you picking up the trash? Why are all the children out here picking up trash?
Because we want to have our school clean. We want our city clean.
And that about summed it up. It looked today as though everybody in town did want to clean up the city. Hughes Rudd, CBS News, Albion, Michigan.
This is pollution, and it's put here by who? Man, all right. So this isn't anything that nature itself has done. When you look at nature, you're going to find it's a pretty beautiful thing.
28 boys and girls from Council Bluffs, Iowa were out early this Earth Day morning. They're members of Mrs. Willard Hopper's 6th grade science class. Bright, full of answers, another triumph of hope over experience. They took this early nature walk to a high bluff overlooking Omaha to observe firsthand what has been wrought on the land.
Boys and girls, will you look down here? When I was a little girl, we used to swim in the lake down here, but it became so polluted that we can't swim there anymore. All right, now, see the plane that's just going over in the airport, right over from in there? You can see the two types of pollution again, air and noise pollution. And you can see it over in the area over there, back over in here. And I think it might be a good idea then for us to just give it a little bit of thought. Karen and Jill, are you going to lead us in our song? Judy. All right.
This land is your land, this land is my land, from California to the New York Island, from Redwood Forest to the coasting waters. This land was made for you and me.
All right, now if it was made for you and for me, then I think it's our responsibility to take care of it. So I want you to take a good look at it before we go back.
At the Abraham Lincoln High School in Council Bluffs, the atmosphere in the gymnasium where the Earth Day observance is being held is hot and oppressive. But that's because the students who arranged this program, largely on their own initiative, want it that way. They don't want you to leave here feeling comfortable.
They were all found up there. See, we got that, especially at Bonham Street, you know. And just within 2.5 blocks radius of the school, we found every single can, and we only scratched the surface. There are thousands, tens of thousands of cans.
Large crowds watched as a chemistry student proposed a way to end industrial waste. Two grimly humorous young men predicted this fate by 1975 for anyone not wearing a mask. Others said they planned to bury their auto engine before it buried them. But the highlight was a film made by the students themselves showing local pollution problems. The student coordinator for the Earth Day observance, Nancy Carlton. Do you think this will pass, that it will be, in effect, a fad, that next year there will be another issue?
I don't see how that can pass over because it's here, it's now, and it's real. And if we don't do something about it, it's just going to get worse.
A good part of the effort to make this Earth Day a success was concentrated, of course, in the major population and pollution centers. We have a report on several of the big cities, beginning with Robert Shackney in Boston.
It had been a small and it seemed a thoroughly peaceful, non-disruptive demonstration. Students finishing Earth Day with what they called a die-in at Boston's Logan Airport. Coffins to symbolize the problems of airport and airplane pollution.
In the name of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, I command all persons here assembled immediately and peacefully to disperse.
It wasn't clear why the state police ordered the demonstrators out, but they were leaving when, for no visible reason, trouble. The police charging the crowd, seizing the coffins, pushing those who moved too slowly, and arresting 13. There had been talk in advance of crowds of thousands, of attempts to disrupt the airport, but that didn't happen. This crowd, just a few hundred, had seemed orderly and nonviolent.
So uncalled for, no chance was given. People were trying to get up. They were really trying, and incredible. They didn't give them a chance. The kid was trying to get the door.
Earth Day in Logan Airport. Police arrests disorder. Robert Shackney, CBS News, Boston.
For 2 hours, fashionable Fifth Avenue was off-limits to automobiles and became a crowded pedestrian mall. Autos were banned on busy 14th Street, too, and thousands of persons jammed into Union Square to attend an Earth Day rally. The square hadn't looked this clean in years, with volunteer help doing the sprucing up. It was a fun day for many school-age youngsters participating in their very first demonstration. There were dozens of exhibits, including this block-long air bubble, to prove how quiet it can be in a busy city. The 2 streets that were blocked off provided islands of quiet. The quality of air improved, but you didn't have to go far to find Manhattan as it really is. Morton Dean, CBS News, New York.
Welcome, sulfur dioxide. Hello, carbon monoxide.
In terms of air pollution, Chicago ranks close to the top nationally, which isn't much to sing about, but that they did at a mass rally in the Loop to mark Earth Day. Over 4,000 persons came to listen to the singing and the speeches, much less than what was expected. Among the recommendations to improve the environment, the establishment of pollution courts to quickly try offenders, and the elimination of the internal combustion engine, a suggestion no doubt aimed at purifying the city's often choking atmosphere. Ike Pappas, CBS News, Chicago.
Thousands of students demonstrated at colleges and universities throughout the West. At Caltech, while others did the talking, one toddler was doing his own bit to protect the environment. One of the talkers was Dr. James Bonner, a biologist.
When we look around our Earth and see the ability that man has shown to devastate our Earth, it makes one think that the whole world would be better off if man hadn't been invented.
Black balloons by the hundreds represented pollution of the land, sea, and air. The same symbolism at Stanford University, where the center of attraction was an ecology fair. One demonstration showed poisonous emissions from an automobile. Another exhibit urged useful recycling of waste products. And yet another called for population control. Several thousand Stanford students turned out to hear, among others, a television star whose sponsor sells detergents, Eddie Albert.
The information is, let's look at each other with respect and recognize that the gross national product is the love affair we've had with that is idiotic. That man is the important thing. And that this earth is the important thing. This tiny little ball has only got so much oxygen, so many acres of earth to live off of, so much water, so much metals that we need to survive. And if we louse it up, if we throw it into the sea, if we ruin it, we're dead.
Another speaker who vowed as a college girl never to bear children and who works now with Planned Parenthood, Stephanie Mills.
I think that it's terribly important for us to begin to involve ourselves in politics so that we can turn the system around. If we got together to dump Nixon, we might end up with nothing, but I think that may be worth a try. Obviously, this administration is being utterly hypocritical in its attempts to deal with environmental pollution, obviously. $1 billion a year is what Walter Hickel is talking about spending cleaning up water pollution. Now, 80 times that is what we're spending to defoliate Southeast Asia and to incinerate Southeast Asians. This has got to come to a halt.
At UCLA, the crowd was thin. Those who were there heard a school teacher and her fourth graders sing about pollution.
There's no more blue in the sky today.
number of cities, some Earth Day participants, seeking dramatic ways to present their cause, focused on what they considered to be the major industrial polluters. University students in Minneapolis chose that approach, and we have a report from Hal Walker.
Earth Day celebrants in Minneapolis zeroed in on industry, issuing tongue-in-cheek awards to local firms which they selected as outstanding polluters. But the major target of the demonstrators was the General Electric Company.
On behalf of myself,
By whatever non-polluting means possible, the anti-pollution demonstrators made their way in caravan to Minneapolis Auditorium, where the GE stockholders were meeting. Denied entrance, the paraders gathered outside, shouting anti-company slogans and challenging GE officials on their firm's defense contract.
We can't produce weaponry anymore. We're killing ourselves. We're not killing our enemy. We're killing ourselves. We're dying from within in this country.
I realize. I realize.
We're polluting ourselves to death. We're misusing our fossil fuels, our unrenewable resources.
We have many problems, and I think we're in General Electric as aware of them as anybody.
We have to decrease our consumption of electricity because most of our electricity is produced by the burning of fossil fuels.
I'm sure that nothing I could say could change your opinion.
Unable to confront the stockholders directly, the demonstrators moved on to a nearby church for a rock music funeral service. Again, GE came under attack.
General Electric stands high on the list of those institutions that have constituted our overconsumptive and planned obsolescence culture. It is the fourth largest corporation in the world. It is the second largest defense contractor in this country. It is directly tied to the military-industrial complex with 90 former high-ranking military officers now employed. 2 of its directors were formerly secretaries of defense.
After lambasting industry, the anti-polluters prepared for burial electrical appliances, which in their estimation are both unnecessary and contributors to pollution. Hal Walker, CBS News, Minneapolis.
Most participants in Earth Day were white. Although some Negroes did take part, Negro leadership was conspicuously absent. Black militants and campus radicals have criticized the environmental campaign, calling it a white middle-class diversion from the issues of Vietnam and race. But members of at least one minority group, Mexican Americans, took part in Earth Day in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and Bob Schieffer reports.
They gathered here in an atmosphere of fiesta, many of them dressed in native folk costumes and listening to a strolling mariachi band. But beneath all the gaiety, there was an undercurrent of cynicism. This is Bareilles, where the poor people of Albuquerque live. And to the young Chicanos who organized this rally, the environmental crisis is a very real and a very personal issue.
We're going to make people understand that the kind of things that come from air pollution and water pollution are the same kinds of things that cause racism, that cause poverty, that cause hunger in this country. So we're all going to be marching today, okay? Unidos marchemos y unidos venceremos. Viva la raza! Viva!
The march moved out and snaked through the city's worst poverty area. There were young people mostly, many from the University of New Mexico on the other side of town. The Chicano Student Organization had endorsed the environment activities on campus, but they contended the real crisis was here. They carried signs saying "Free the Brown People" and Chicano Power, and they followed a route seldom seen by outsiders. It is a neighborhood of dirt roads, outdoor plumbing, and adobe houses. The city's waste disposal plant is a few blocks away, and on windy days it covers the area with a choking gas. Eventually, the city hopes to correct it. The turnout was a small one, no more than 300 by police count. The young organizers had hoped for 3,000. Still, they were philosophical about it. Down here, one of them said, life just goes on from day to day. Nobody ever gets too excited about anything anymore. Bob Schieffer, CBS News, in the Bareilles section of Albuquerque.
Earth Day, this opportunity to take a look at the small space the universe grants us, turned out in some places to be a joke on ourselves. There were enthusiastic demonstrations in New York City today, for example, and at the same time, air pollution reached what officials called unsatisfactorily high levels. Both sulfur dioxide and carbon monoxide pollution doubled the accepted limits because of low winds which let the poisons hang in the morning air.
Earth Day, a question of survival, will continue after station identification.
One of the biggest Earth Day observances was in Philadelphia, where an estimated 20 to 40,000 persons gathered in perfect weather in the city's largest park. It was an Earth Day success story, a major demonstration in a major city. But it did not come easily. There were many organizational problems, including a heated controversy over whether to accept financial aid from industries causing pollution. David Culhane followed the Philadelphia story from its start to today's colorful demonstration.
Fairmount Park in Philadelphia today is much like a rock music festival as a teach-in on the environment. A few older people, a few blacks, and some of the poor, but mainly white middle-class young people, as much aroused by the music as by the damage done to the environment by pollution. This is Philadelphia on Earth Day.
Welcome, sulfur dioxide. Hello, carbon monoxide.
Welcome, sulfur dioxide. Hello, carbon monoxide. A song from the worldwide hit musical Hair. It was one of the first hints suggesting that young people were beginning to care as much about the environment as they do about the peace movement and civil rights. Their dream for the age of Aquarius was to let the sunshine in. Let the sunshine in. This is what keeps the sun from shining in on Philadelphia. Hundreds of tons of soot, smoke, fly ash, dust, sulfur dioxide, hydrocarbons, metal fumes, organic matter, odors and malodors on each and every day. And it all comes from places like this, the city's top 10 polluters. Power plants, oil refineries, the city incinerators, chemical plants, coke ovens, smelting operations. And that's just in the air. The city's rivers offer a whole new dimension of pollution. So much noxious waste is involved that some people here have begun to call their city Filthydelphia. But it's pretty much what you would expect to find in any major American city. Public reaction against this kind of thing caused a comparatively small group, mainly college students, to try to put together not just an Earth Day, but an Earth Week to arouse the city about the problems of pollution here. It wasn't a simple job. They encountered several difficulties.
The sheer physicality of
the first problem for the Earth Week Steering Committee was to find out precisely who is polluting the air and water around Philadelphia and how they are doing it. The fact that the municipal incinerators ranked of local industry, but the city finally came around.
Okay, what happened with the city today, this morning, was we met with Dr. Ingram, and he copped to it. We're getting all the pollution information that the city has. Information that's been confidential for the last 4 years. So I think, you know, we did a thing. We really made it there.
But once having made it, what should they do with this information? A direct attack on industries that pollute as student committees planned in other cities? Marches? Demonstrations? Or should the committee seek money and cooperation from industry and the Chamber of Commerce? The decision was not easy for a committee naturally disposed toward direct action.
The Chamber invited us to a meeting. We spent 3 days here in these offices meeting, trying to decide whether we should go at all. Would we be co-opted by business? By accepting money, by accepting anything from business, would we not be diluting our effort completely? We finally decided to go and see what would happen.
What happened was that the Earth Week Committee finally did decide to accept money from the very companies which are polluting Philadelphia's air and water. The business establishment and a student committee, certainly an unorthodox alliance.
So with the $24,000 which we have actually collected, of the $34,000 that's actually been pledged, and the $45,000 that we seek to achieve, here is an additional check to you, Ed, and to Austin, which I'd like to turn over to you at this stage of the game.
It was a tentative, rather uneasy alliance. The Earth Week Committee said it would not sponsor marches and demonstrations against the industries. The Chamber of Commerce called off plans for a counterattacking advertising campaign. And the Chamber agreed to encourage its members to acknowledge any of their operations that cause pollution and to discuss programs for a cleanup. And the Earth Week Committee was left free to publicize the activities of the polluting industries. At one less than successful Earth Week rally at the University of Pennsylvania, some students made clear their objections to accepting money from companies which are polluters.
If I remember correctly, around the beginning of the Earth Week Committee, there were talks about trying to have at least one activity during Earth Week centered somewhere in proximity to the refineries, so that there could be a people's march toward the refineries. And it seems that this has changed, and I'm wondering if there's any correlation between the change and the check from Atlantic Richfield. Or is it the Chamber of Commerce check?
And that comes around to a problem that I think Earth Week has to face up to, which is where do the bulk of their funds come from, and what does that do to their ability to really face up to fundamental issues?
But most of the people working to make Earth Week a success were apparently satisfied that the time has not yet come for a direct confrontation with the polluting industries. These young people wearing gas masks to dramatize the dangers of polluted air simply went ahead campaigning for a clean environment. And there were expressions of delight that some 30% of the projected Earth Week budget of $70,000 is coming from businesses. Delight that the money is being used to publicize how these same businesses cause pollution. The young people built exhibits downtown and passed out clear spring water and surgical masks to symbolize the dangers of polluted air and water. The objective was to reach masses of people from every part of the community, including the blacks of Philadelphia's ghettos. Some members of the black community responded, but attempts to enlist black leaders got nowhere.
What the blacks said to us was that by joining you, we fragment our own power base. The head of one of the largest black groups in the city, one of the most powerful black leaders in the city, came to this meeting and said, you're part of a Nixon trick. You are basically doing what Nixon wants you to do. Take energy away from the black issue, take energy away from the war issue, and take everybody's attention onto ecology. You can't be everything to everybody. You'll end up being nothing to anyone.
I don't think we are really committed to get involved in Earth Week, you know, up to our necks, because, see, we still have hungry children to feed, and we still have houses to try to build, and I think we still have a commitment to people that don't really know about Earth Week to try to explain it. I think we're taking the emphasis off the beat-up buildings and the whole problems that go along with living in an inner city, so I'm figuring that we don't really have a part in this, because the polluted streams that they're talking about, we've never seen anyway. The trout, I don't know if they're dying. We've never seen that. I know the rats are bigger here. If we mean polluted sewers, I'm ready to play with that.
So the environmentalists and the black community agreed to disagree and go their own ways. But at least the cautious alliance with the business establishment has more or less worked. Earth Week is advertised in the windows of oil companies and some other businesses. The city government is in a cooperative mood, although hardly participating with the zest shown, for instance, in New York. Radio and television stations have given free airtime.
There's a problem about the air, the water, and the earth. It's being ruined. That's what Earth Week is all about.
What it's all about is trying to convince everyone in Philadelphia that industrial activity like this has serious drawbacks as well as advantages. And the Earth Week Committee wanted to reach more than just students. They wanted help from people like Mrs. Rita Cugini, the wife of a fireman in southwest Philadelphia. Mrs. Cugini did become involved in Earth Week.
When you think about it, when you walk around your own neighborhood, what do those words mean to you?
It means a horrible smell from the nearby refineries. It means open burning by our auto junkyards. It's burned out grass, and the trees that we have, few and far between, are dwarfed. And that's about it. Sulfur dioxide. You know, I've studied the technical aspects, so that pollution to me is technically sulfur dioxide and particulates and nitrogen dioxide, which is a poison, which I don't think my children should have to breathe. It's bad. It frightens me, totally. My oldest son wasn't born here. We were farther up north. And that was almost a year and a half, 2 years ago that we moved here. Ever since we have been in Southwest, and this isn't paranoia or imagination, but since we've been down here, he has colds frequently. And my youngest son, who's only a year old, has never been without a cold. You know, a week at a time, 10 days at a time, he's all right. And then the sniffles begin again. The only thing that's here that he could possibly have this reaction to is the air problem, the lack of oxygen, and surplus of everything else.
What sort of reaction do you get from your neighbors? You go and talk to them about ecology and air pollution. How do they react?
I can't get across the point that this, which is mostly invisible, the problem is mostly invisible, even though they do see black smoke, and even though they have to wipe their windowsills 3 times a day, they still don't understand that this is affecting their lungs, so that we don't ever fully discuss the problem. It's just diverted to something else.
In other words, you think that they've simply become accustomed to pollution?
Immune psychologically and accustomed to it, to the odors and to the sight of it. It doesn't upset them anymore.
One of the things Mrs. Cugini did for Earth Week was to help college students promote a pollution bus tour.
Your bank accepted this poster to be put up so that the people would see it. It's an Earth Week activity, the Philadelphia Pollution Trail Bus Tour, in which the people are going to get a very close-up, solid look at all the chemicals spewing out of our industrial boilers and all of the gases pouring out that they don't seem to realize yet are going to kill them. We want the people involved, so this is to show them the chemicals coming out, to show them that it isn't stopping and that they have to fight to make it do so. It's a very depressing ride, but it's meant to be.
And even the churches were prepared to do something about the depressing condition of the city's air and water. This was the Salem Zion United Church of Christ and its pastor, Paul Hetrick, on Sunday.
The church also is involved in Earth Week because some of its poor theology has helped to cause the ecological imbalance that we are facing in nature today. We have always, for the last several hundred years, addressed ourselves to the theme of progress as a theological principle. And we have believed and affirmed that those people who do progress, God certainly is blessing. And because we have progressed and not thought about the ways, the methods that we were using in order to progress, to grow into our technological expertise, we have plundered, we have raped, we have begun to lay the earth in desolation. We have helped to foul up your air, pollute your streams, and clutter your earth with trash and gadgets, and we have destroyed many of your living creatures. Your forests have been cut down, and the earth's resources plundered without concern for the generations and the times to come. Now our hearts are heavy with sorrow for what we have done, but not before our sinuses and lungs warned us of great dangers, and our eyes told us that some of the beauty has gone out of your earth.
Today, young people from all over Philadelphia came out to start putting some beauty back into the earth. 2 key speakers at the teach-in were Senator Edmund Muskie, a longtime advocate of action to reverse the destruction of the environment, and Harvard's Nobel Prize-winning biologist George Wald.
Coming into Philadelphia about an hour and a half ago on a plane, I was surprised at the Philadelphia Navy Yard full of ships, and then came a lot of oil tanks, and then came that devastated area. You know, it takes a full-scale bombing to produce the devastation anywhere else in the world that exists in the outskirts of every American city. It's a kind of do-it-yourself devastation.
We've reached a point where our technology produces more kinds of things than we really want, more kinds of things than we really need, more kinds of things than we can live with. We have to choose to say no, to give up some luxuries. And these kinds of decisions will be the real measure of our commitment to the environment. It means choosing cleaner cars rather than faster cars, more parks instead of more highways, and more houses and more schools instead of more weapons and more wars. Consider the national budget for 1971, that balanced budget of unbalanced priorities. That budget balances $275 million for the SST against $106 million for air pollution control. It balances $3.4 billion for the space program against $1.4 billion for housing. And it balances $7.3 billion for arms research and development against $1.4 billion for higher education. Those are unbalanced priorities. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense to say we cannot afford to protect our environment just yet. It doesn't make sense to say that we cannot afford to fight against hunger and poverty just yet. And it doesn't make sense to say that we cannot afford to provide decent housing and needed medical care just yet. We can afford to do these things if we admit that there are other things we cannot afford. False security we can do without, and prices we are willing to pay. I believe that those of you who have gathered here to save the earth are willing to pay the price to save our environment.
The entire celebration of Earth Day in Philadelphia was peaceful and restrained, a moderate proposal for change. But Edward Furia of the Earth Week Committee could give no guarantee about the future.
What we tried to do in Philadelphia, and I think we've succeeded, is to try to get a real mass involvement of middle America, of labor, of business, of the spectrum of society, which has really been kind of turned off to what students have been trying to do, what blacks have been trying to do. We're involved in a mass movement in the fullest sense of the word. We're trying to get public officials and politicians to think in terms of what is the social cost to society. And if they do nothing, and if this thing becomes a lie, then I think the Earth Week Committee may be replaced by a different kind of committee. Instead of a revolution of values, then the other revolutionaries will take over.
A common theme of today's speeches was criticism of the Nixon administration. Time and again, it was charged that White House programs were lagging far behind White House rhetoric. It was apparent that many, especially young people, were suspicious of administration's sincerity about a better environment. Earlier this week, Russell Train, the president's top environmental advisor, explained the administration's attitude toward Earth Day to CBS News correspondent David Shoemaker.
I think the young people, the people who have planned this Earth Day, have been anxious to make it their own thing and not have the administration or any government group or industry or anybody else or the universities themselves take it away from them. And we've been anxious to not give the impression that we're trying to take anything away from them either. It is their thing, and that's all to the good.
A good many of those outside the administration, though, seem to have a greater sense of urgency. The young people, Congress multiplies administration requests for funds. Are you dragging your feet?
No, I think very definitely we're not dragging our feet. Of course, the administration and the president has to speak for more than one interest. And if you're on the outside, you can speak for the environment or any other particular interest and insist that this be given the highest priority and receive the entire budget allocation of the federal government, if you wish. The president, of course, isn't in the position to do that. He has to represent all the interests of the American people here and abroad. And there are a vast number of competing claims upon federal programs. At the same time, the president has said publicly that the environment is our first priority, and I believe he means that. I don't think this is a question here where the administration is at odds with the public on this issue. The administration has made a full commitment to environment. And here again, I would say that perhaps maybe we won't move as fast as everyone would like us to move. But in the overall, I don't see that kind of a confrontation between the administration and the public at all.
This is Dan Rather, CBS News at the White House. The president, as Russell Train says, seeks to avoid any confrontation in the arena of ecological politics. Mr. Nixon this day also avoided any participation. The White House attitude toward Earth Day was one of benign neglect. The president's personal posture was one of detachment. But it is unclear how much of that detachment was calculated and how much of it was forced. Several weeks ago, the White House invited the national organizers of Earth Day to drop by for a chat. They refused. Christopher Demuth, the president's 23-year-old assistant for environmental affairs, blames Dennis Hayes, the national coordinator of Earth Day, saying that Hayes was more interested in an anti-Nixon publicity stance than in ensuring that the observance was truly nonpartisan. But many of the president's advisors were arguing all along that Mr. Nixon should avoid Earth Day like poison ivy. They pointed out, for example, that the idea of a national teach-in on environmental affairs belonged to a Democrat, Wisconsin Senator Gaylord Nelson, and, perhaps more importantly, that there is limited amount of money in the federal budget currently for any action on environmental problems. So the president, vice president, and most members of the cabinet stood aside today. Interior Secretary Hickel in Alaska and Transportation Secretary Volpe in Maryland did make Earth Day speeches, and the State Department, at its own initiative, set up an environmental seminar led by the president's science advisor, Dr. Lee DeBridge.
And I don't think we should hand out money to industry to make better cars, which are non-polluting, or hand out money to industry to install pollution equipment to reduce the pollution of the streams. We must insist that the automobile makers and the industrial managers do these things at their own cost, which they recover through the normal channels of the competitive market. But there are certain public costs. It is clear that public sewage systems are taxpayers' responsibilities, and it is proper that taxpayers pay the cost of those through the tax mechanism.
While allowing Dr. DeBridge and some others in the administration to make Earth Day speeches, the president would not allow the issuance of any official White House proclamation making this Save the Environment Week or anything of that sort, which struck many supporters of Earth Day as unfair, since the president, in the recent past, has officially proclaimed National Boating Week, Small Business Week, and even National Archery Week. Dan Rather, CBS News, the White House.
The White House did issue a statement that today's events, quote, should be a beginning of a new and sustained public commitment to the environment, unquote. Some quarters saw more than coincidence in the fact that Earth Day occurred on the 100th anniversary of the birth of Lenin, the father of Soviet communism. A high school in Boca Raton, Florida, postponed its activities until tomorrow. And the Comptroller General of Georgia, James Bentley, sent out $1,600 worth of telegrams warning that Earth Day might be a communist plot. Drs. Paul Ehrlich and Dr. Barry Commoner, both biologists who were among the first to alert Americans about the ticking of the environment bomb, addressed Earth Day meetings today.
We have then an extremely serious world demographic situation. The population situation is bad beyond what any demographer even dreamed of 25 years ago. What about the resource situation in the world? Well, the most important resource to all of us, of course, is food. We have 3.6 billion people in the world today. Roughly 50% of them are hungry in one sense or another. This year, somewhere between 10 and 20 million people will starve to death on this planet. Last year the same, the year before that the same, next year almost certainly more and more and more. That's the answer to the question that's often raised, you know, when will the population food crunch hit? Well, it hit a lot of people already. It's going to hit a lot more people this year. Should you think you're safe in the United States, you are very sadly mistaken. Well, the picture is then not altogether bright. The Hobson's choices we face, if we don't control our population and environment, the horses in Mr. Hobson's barn include famine and plague and thermonuclear war, and who knows which one or what combination will come. And the question is, of course, what are we going to do about it?
You were born under the shadow of the bomb. You are the first generation in the history of man to carry DDT in your fat and strontium-90 in your bones. Your body will record in time the full effects of the environmental destruction on mankind. It is you who face the frightful task of seeking humane knowledge in a world which has, with cunning perversity, transformed the power that knowledge generates into an instrument of catastrophe. Knowledge is not enough. I think we have to take the knowledge to the people. Let us help them learn what they need to know and what they need to do to decide for themselves the future course of our society. Let's organize a national teach out. Let us begin to learn the facts and teach them to everyone in the community. I think the environmental crisis is a grim and terrible challenge. But on this day, the Earth's new birthday, we accept this challenge. We declare that the proper use of science is not to conquer nature, but to live in it. That to save ourselves, we must save the world that is our habitat. On this day, we shall begin, by our own acts, to dedicate the wisdom of science and the power of technology to the welfare of man. We shall survive. Thank you.
The hoopla of Earth Day is over. The problems remain. Only time will tell if these demonstrations accomplished anything. But let's summarize the points that were brought home today to a lot of people who have missed the point so far. For instance, the militants who see all this as an establishment trick to divert attention from what to them are more urgent concerns like civil rights or like Vietnam. They seem to have missed the point that there are no civil rights or peace in a lifeless world. For instance, the politicians who see this as a safe crusade, they seem to have missed the point that it will involve treading on more special interests than ever in our history. For the first time, they may even have to come out against motherhood. For instance, those in industry who see the crisis as only the hysterical creation of do-gooders, they've missed the point if they haven't heard the unanimous voice of the scientists warning that halfway measures and business as usual cannot possibly pull us back from the edge of the precipice. For instance, the too silent majority. The greatest disappointment today was the degree of non-participation across the country, and especially the absence of adults. And the young people who did participate were in a skylark mood, which contrasted rudely with the messages of apocalypse. Those who ignored Earth Day, well, that's one thing. Those who ignore the crisis of our planet, that's quite another. The indifferent have missed the point that to clean up the air and earth and water in the few years science says is left to us means personal involvement and may mean personal sacrifice, the likes of which Americans have never been asked to make in time of peace. The sense of today's teach-in was that America must undertake a revolution in its way of life. Affluent America will, we were told, almost certainly have to scale down its standards of living, give up having as many cars, as many children, as many cans, as many conveniences, as much conspicuous consumption. Someday, we heard today, the world will be a better place if it listens and acts. But in the meantime, perhaps for a generation or more, it will be frighteningly costly to each of us to clean up the mess each of us has made. But the cost of not doing so is more frightening. That's what today's message really means. And those who marched today, and those who slept, and those who scorned, are in this thing together. What is at stake, and what is in question, is survival. This is Walter Cronkite. Good night.
Earth Day demonstrations began in practically every city and town in the United States this morning, the first massive nationwide protest against the pollution of the environment. The outcry took innumerable forms. Some students went to school wearing gas masks. The automobile was banned in parts of some cities, including New York. Miami planned a dead orange parade. Skywriting planes were ordered out to inscribe the word air over Los Angeles. In Jamestown, New York, the Kiwanis Club arranged to dump 20 tons of sand in a downtown area to show just how much dirt falls in 1 square mile of the city during just 30 days of maximum air pollution. In Washington, the House and Senate adjourned for the day. Practically every senator and congressman was off to make speeches on the year's most popular and least risky election issue. But there was a pre-Earth Day rally in New York's Wall Street, and Senator Jacob Javits, voicing the concern of many national leaders, cautioned against letting pollution overwhelm other vital national issues.
Concerned that this fight against environmental and physical pollution is so popular that it will tout us off, to use a New York phrase, it will tout us off the long-standing and at least equally vital effort to deal with poverty, alienation, racial tensions, the gross inadequacy of health services, education, housing, and intelligent population control, and the ending of the war in Vietnam.
The Wall Street crowds broke into song to express their protest. Later today, to show concern for automobile pollutants, New York will close part of famed Fifth Avenue to auto traffic, and Mayor Lindsay was keeping appointments in an electric car. In Philadelphia, where the Declaration of Independence was signed, demonstrators at another pre-Earth Day rally signed a so-called Declaration of Interdependence, dramatizing the point that every man depends on his fellows and on nature to help keep the environment livable. 2,000 ghetto residents were boycotting another Philadelphia rally today, arguing that the nation's newfound infatuation with the environment has distracted attention from the misery of the poor. This morning, there was an awesome Earth Day warning from a government scientist. In remarks prepared for the American Geophysical Union in Washington, Dr. J. Murray Mitchell said pollution and overpollution, unless checked, could so warm the Earth in 200 years as to create a greenhouse effect, melting the Arctic ice cap and flooding vast areas of the world.